Now we can go down south. Jamie McAuley is well known to many here, and I'm sure he's going to be entertaining and intelligent for us with his views from Te Anau. Take it away, Jamie.
Peepers, entertaining and intelligent. That's a bit of an ask. Yeah, kia ora na tātou katoa, ko Jamie McAuley tēnei ko kaitia ki Kanaro Koiro o te papata whai te ata whenua. How do we get my view back here? All right. So I'm a senior ranger in the Department of Conservation down here in Te Anau Fiordland National Park, my role is we've got a whole lot of rangers out there in the national park that are running these big-scale conservation programs, lots of species monitoring and lots of big amounts of trapping in 1080. My job's kind of to help give them what they need to be able to go out and do it. So lots of the things that we've been discussing in the last couple of days around how much is enough, when should we kick stuff into action, is it working? And so what I do when people ask me questions like what do we need is I go and ask them, because those guys know what they're talking about. They're the ones out there doing it. And so I had a bit of a chat to our team and also to some other dock staff that look after areas in the Catlins, Wanaka, Queenstown. And there are kind of three main themes that came out of that. The first one is they want help. They want this, this is exactly, I really commend your approach and everything. That seems like exactly what they're looking for is more integration and that kind of kotahitanga and manakitanga that Tama was talking about. So, and I really congratulate you guys on your approach here, because some of the stuff that's come out of this few days is, I can see the direct input from issues raised by our staff, seeing stuff on the ground that then, feeds out the other end. So good stuff. The two other things that really came up time and time again was outcomes. These guys are really all about the flippers. They're the ones that are monitoring the species and, holding the bat up saying, look, they're going down, or they're going up, or it's working. So they're really good at bringing it all back to outcomes. So rat tracking is nice, but birds going up is nicer. And again, the other thing was just all about biology. So a general feeling that we still don't have enough basic biology about the animals to really know what's going on. So for example, better information about density impact functions. So often we're borrowing from a different setting to try and sort of close one eye and tilt your head sideways and say, is what might be happening. So this is an example from Nathan Whitmore, some work he did for Forest and Bird in Central Otago to line up their Mohua transects to their rat tracking indice. This kind of works great because it gives them an idea around, 11% rat tracking might be about the damage threshold for when you start seeing damage in that setting. And like Doug was saying, I'm all about some Bayesian approach to updating our knowledge as we sort of get more, but certainly the more of this stuff, the better for how we're managing these settings. And as part of that, including ways of establishing a better idea of stope density. So like Graham was saying in his last talk, tracking tunnels are a really difficult way. There's not a lot of support from forest managers down here for using tracking tunnels, even the longer runs for establishing stopes. And I was trying to rack my brain to think of any cases where tracking tunnels have been used to set like density impact functions for stopes, and I couldn't think of that. So one thing that came up several times from our guys was just better ways to index them under the stopes. And yeah, like in that previous one, that was just transect walking transects for monitoring mohua, and those kind of tools are really valuable in terms of how we can check in. So this here is some rock wren transects that have been done the last 5 or so years in the Murchison Mountains, and so Graham and Colin's teams who did the sort of intensive work, the tier 3 style nest monitoring, figure out what the agent's decline are, put a management intervention in place and see the numbers climb back up again. But they also put work into this, which is just getting a good tool to check in with what, is what we think should be happening actually happening. And in this case, this is from the Murchison Mountains, which has also got lots of stoke traps in place, and it's not. So these things are worth their weight in gold to us. I know Susan said yesterday that the tracking tunnel network's just absolute gold, and I totally agree, couldn't agree more. But if that's gold, then this stuff is platinum, because this is telling us, with the tracking tunnels, we can kind of infer what might be happening. This is telling us what is happening. Your bird's going down. So the more we can bring online tools like that, and of course, when you put the two things together, we can start getting these nice density impact functions that we need for the type of modelling that's being discussed. And then that's good. That might tell us about a bird or a bird community in the case of 5-minute bird counts or something, but there seems like a desire to get a broader view of the impacts of what's going on. We've got all these changes happening, both unmanaged sites being slowly degraded, our management potentially creating winners and losers, the climate, and so getting a broader picture of what's going on, and specifically getting more information about invertebrate communities and lizards. And it's sort of come up a few times in this workshops that vertebrates could be that missing piece of the puzzle there. There's a lot of talk about seed fall and fruiting driving rats, but I think I sense some discomfort from our team with the 1080 that they would really like more information about what role both invertebrates play in the ramp going up for rodents, but then also how they're affected in that decline phase of a beach mast, and potentially additional rat numbers, mice numbers. The other thing that came up was around, we're great to use these abundance measures and indexes of abundance, but to move beyond what our team see is that when it comes to outcomes, that the other half of the predation equation, it's half or the other portion. Some of it is how many there are, but there's also this thing of the behaviour and what they're eating, and so we're seeing sites with very few predators have a huge impact, and that's sort of come up a little bit as well over the last few days with the likes of the kaka nests at Nelson Lakes, or some in that decline phase, talking about prey switching or greater impacts in those periods. So getting a greater understanding of those behavioural impacts will help us put together the two, because I don't think that abundance alone explains what we're seeing in terms of predation. So that would help. And then this kind of stuff becomes important when we start to look at the changing climates and situations that have been relatively stable, becoming perhaps less stable. So that's for us down here in the cool forests. We're seeing rat density in intermast years come up, or rats pushing into those subalpine and alpine environments. So certainly that's a focus for us. I didn't get a lot of, that wasn't put forward as a big priority from our team, and I don't know whether that's just that they've got their eyes on problems that are right in front of them and don't have a lot of time to pull the vision up to look at what might be happening later, but certainly that's something that I personally would put forward as a priority. And then this brings it to the sort of grand unified theory of putting it all together. How much is enough? Can we back off some sites of that are doing well, and can we, sort of the pulsed management approach at some core Kako sites, 2 years on, 2 years off, or the likes of what the big modelling exercises that Dean's talking about, or we just heard about from Reese. Interesting to note that that's not something practitioners at this level are asking for, and something that I think, because of that feeling that we don't yet understand enough about the biology and the impact thresholds, that there's some skepticism there about you start modelling all the stuff and spitting a number out and people are a bit uncomfortable. But at my level, I certainly think we're making decisions all the time about cutting money, and I'd like to know some sites that we can do less at. I'd like to know some sites, we're doing all this work, is it enough? I think there is value in that kind of approach going forward, within limitations. So, what forest managers want is help their work, someone to get alongside them and work to help solve their problems, which I think is something you guys are doing fantastically well. More biological information about what's occurring across a broader spectrum of taxa, and bringing it back to outcomes. So they're all about, is the fluffy thing going up? Because that's what they're here for at the end of the day. So cheers.
Oh, that's great. Thank you very much, Jamie. I think you lived up to expectations there. Some very clear messages again, about getting alongside researchers, outcomes. And I guess reminding everyone that this landscape scale predator control is quite young. I've got a question for you. Do you feel daunted when you look out at those landscapes and think about hanging on to some of these species?
Yeah, I think I do. I totally, and that's something I feel from my staff quite a bit as well. They feel the pressure of this stuff. There's a lot of these unknowns that they feel like here, and stresses them out. And they're being asked to make calls on boundaries and rats and mice and things where, as you say, it's sort of we're gaining knowledge all the time, and we're doing something because things are in decline. But certainly, I feel the pressure.
Yeah. Cool. All right, I'll get those questions coming in, folks. I've got one here from Matt. Maybe more of a comment than a question. Matt absolutely agrees with you, Jamie, on the desire for advice from science. The feedback he gets to many research outcomes is, so what does that mean for the location I manage, and how do I explain that to the community? Do you want to respond to that at all?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. That the big case study stuff is great, but people do want to know how that fits at their site, and they see the smaller differences. Oh, well, we've actually got quite a few weasels at this site, or and they having data about what is actually going on is gold.
Yeah, and I like what you said about the grand unified theory. So I suppose, hopefully that's, we're getting slightly closer to that, as you say, with these things, garbage in, garbage out, and but still we're all doing these sort of models in our heads, and I think it's timely at this stage to start pulling that stuff together. What did you think about Reese's idea? Would it work, or is it already working in your patch? I think that's JI asking that question, John Innes.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. I think it's something that probably is already occurring. I'd love to see more stuff like that, more knowledge about that. I think about on islands in Fiordland, for example, Anchor Island is just dripping with mohua. They've, in relatively recent years, we've put them onto Resolution Island. If even a small proportion were to fly across Acheron Passage. Once Resolution Island is at capacity, we're talking about, you know, potentially thousands of more every year dispersing off onto the mainland. Maybe we can hang up our boots and we're done. You know, doing some basic maths on that might. Yeah, I'd like to know about how to inform the best strategy based on that stuff. Within limitations, I think, you know, the 2 years on, 2 years off kōkako work at Purdy order. I think the paper modelled 3 years on, 3 years off, and they're pulling it back and doing a conservative thing within that. So maybe helping allay practitioners' fears that if we run it all on the model quite close to the sun, there's not a lot of room for error.
Yeah. Okay, thanks very much. I'm sure a lot of people are envious of you guys having the islands as part of your mix in your landscape. Colin O'Donnell's reminded us that there's a 5,000 hectare bait station area within the 30,000 hectare Eglinton 1080 area, plus traps. I guess there's bait stations in the Iris Burn, and there's probably more I don't know about too. But yeah, I think I'd love people to keep chucking those examples in. I don't know if we've got a very good comprehensive list of where we've actually got a mix of tools going on. So if you know of some, just chuck them in the comments box and maybe we can start adding them up. I know that, you know, from my experience within DOC, that a lot of those areas are actually, the core areas are thrown in by someone else or locally at a local level through some sort of local sponsorship or just the initiatives of the local rangers. And aren't necessarily part of DOC's landscape scale official program. So I think it'd be great to start working towards bringing those things together. But thanks very much, Jamie. That's awesome, mate. And keep up the good work down there.